Hey everyone, today I have the pleasure of talking with Andy Champion. He is the SVP of International over at 6sense. Andy, hi. Thank you so much for joining me.
My absolute pleasure.
So, because the audience may or may not know who you are, can you start with just a brief background of you, your journey, and then we'll dive into kind of a little bit more of how you got this role and some of the spicy topics for today's conversation.
Spicy topics, I like that. So my name is Andy Champion. I have been at 6sense for 6 months now. But I've got about 27-ish years of experience growing predominantly B2B disruptive technology SaaS brands in Europe. I've done that from as far north as Stockholm to as far south as Cape Town in South Africa. And I've had people in all of the major economies. And I've also got a little bit of experience of doing that in APAC as well. But really, what do? I help high growth software companies figure out what go-to-market looks like, how to execute that and operationalize that in Europe, Middle East, and Africa.
Which is all a really big topic nowadays, like storming, go-to-market this, go-to-market that. Yeah. What would you define as like the number one thing that companies do wrong with go-to-market?
Oh, wow. So I would say there are a few things, especially when it comes to EMEA. And we kind of break it down, right? The first thing is we often talk about EMEA or Europe as one market. Conceptually, it's one space. It's not. It's over 25 different countries. And each of those countries, in some cases, they might share a language, but they've got unique cultural expectations. So, for example, in Germany, typically, there is a greater adherence to privacy. Typically, there is a greater requirement to do due diligence. And there's a preference to do it with local companies, whether those be partners or whether those be the actual vendors themselves. Go to the UK, where I'm from, that's very much less the case, right? We do everything in English. Culturally, we're very similar to the US. We've got some nuances. We've got a few differences there. But broadly, it's more similar, whereas broadly, Germany is somewhat different, and then France is different again. Mm-hmm. Italy is different from that. You know, you're not going to want to go to Italy until you're prepared to do every aspect of your business in Italian. And if you try it without those capabilities across your marketing collateral, your operational execution, you're going to find it really, really hard, because the expectation is that you will be doing business in Italian language, which is not the case if you're doing business in the UK or the Nordics, for example. So top tip number one, understand within Europe which markets you're going to go after, and then make sure you're very clear about the order and making sure you're very clear about being prepared for all of the knock-on impacts of expanding throughout the territory. It's not one. It's about 27 different markets, all of which have got unique expectations.
I love that. Follow-up question on that. For companies that are looking to expand more on the international standpoint, do you think that they should have somebody predominantly US-based lead that initiative, or should they hire somebody who's already in one of those countries, or should,
Yep.
I'm sure that's a hot question.
So there's no one way of doing it, but I love your thinking there. I rather unglamorously call them transplants, right? And this is helping, if we look at it from US-based companies coming into Europe, bringing expertise, bringing connectivity back to HQ through having some experienced, trusted member of staff come across at the start to help really act as a catalyst, right? That's what they're there to do. They bring corporate knowledge, not only of the value proposition and how to land it, which is really, really important, but they also bring connectivity back in terms of knowing how to get stuff done in the company. Mm-hmm. And that's so, so valuable. Now, broadly, there are two schools of thought. School of thought number one is you bring across the US leader, and then you complement that person with local people. The second school of thought is that you do it the other way around. So you have a local leader who's got the market knowledge, the expertise, the connections, the contacts, and then you complement that with 1, 2, 3, a handful of experienced individual contributors. Now, I'm probably biased because I'm from the UK, but I've seen it work both ways, and neither way is bad. It's just what do you want to optimize for, and then understanding how you mitigate any downstream impact. So if you choose a local leader, one of the things you're going to want to do very, very quickly is get them comfortable with the company, get them connected into all of the key functions, into their business partner, and then find a way to help them communicate their knowledge and apply your business proposition, your value proposition to the market. If you do it the other way around, where you bring across a US leader, you've got to really get them plugged into the market. You've got to get them into your partner network, into your channels. You've got to help them come up to speed on the nuances, especially if you're looking just beyond the UK into some of the other countries that I touched on earlier, because there are cultural nuances. And what works, for example, here in the US may not work elsewhere in Europe.
I love those super valuable insights. So there's one way to just expand international. The second one is, what's the strategy that's actually going to be the right one once we're actually there, which we were talking about prior to actually hit record, that ABM is more of like a foreign concept. Do you think that's more of just like a lack of knowledge or a reluctance to accept?
I'm not sure it's either. Commonly, people would describe the UK market, the European market, as perhaps following the US. That's a fairly common perception. I'm not sure that I buy into that. I think the lived experience is different. One example is around GDPR, around privacy, around the concerns of how we track and analyze and follow people's behavior. Now, the reality is that in the US, broadly, there is a more liberal view to that. And then in different countries in Europe, there can be a slightly firmer view through to, for example, as we touched on Germany, a more conservative view. Broadly there, people are less comfortable with the concept of tracking. In the B2C world, we're down to individual level. In the B2B world, obviously, it's more generic than that. And so I think, it's really important to understand the nuances of how you execute operationally. And when it comes to ABM, I mean, the good news is that most of the technology providers that one might partner with, they've done the hard work, right? So they've got the capabilities built into the platform. They've got things like do not call lists so that you can suppress people that have either not opted in or who have expressly opted out. But understanding those nuances and how they impact your strategy then helps you understand how to adapt your strategy to make sure that whatever broadly good looks like here in the US, you can give it a different flavor. You can give it a slight tweak, if you like, for when you go into France or when you go into Sweden or when you go into the Middle East, because all of those cultural expectations come through, not just in legislation, but also in people's expectations. And so I think, to come back to your question, it's not a correct characterization to say one market is ahead of the other. What I think it's more accurate to say is they're just different, right? They're just different flavors of ice cream. In the US, we've got maybe mint chocolate chip, and in France, it's strawberry, and in Italy, it's Napolitana, or whatever it is, the ones with the green and the red stripes through it. They're just different.
Yeah.
But it's still ice cream. The basic fundamentals do not change. You need to understand your ICP. You need to understand your buying personas. If you're really smart, you're leveraging technology, as we heard at the keynote here at our conference earlier, to identify those accounts that are in market, and then apply your resource to intelligently engage those accounts with context, with high levels of personalization. And that doesn't change by market. Those principles are writ true all the way through whichever market you're in.
I love that. I talk a lot, it's season 1 as well as season 2, and the guests that I've been having for my podcast about just going back to the fundamentals. I feel like a lot of marketers, they lose sight of what the fundamentals should be. And of course, no strategy is cookie cutter. No strategy should be a one size fits all, right? But marketers are always excited about the next shiny thing, or they're always excited about the next key topic. And I always have to remind individuals, especially like clients that I work with, of like, let's extract everything that we once thought. My cord is stuck. Let's extract everything that we once thought we knew, and let's go back and rebuild it from the ground up. If we knew nothing, if none of the shiny objects were, flashing in our eyes, how would we go about it differently? And for me, it's looking back at the fundamentals. I think that's such a crucial point that you touched on, is just understanding that, as well as the different markets, like just them being different, and fundamentals sometimes may translate one-to-one, but they might also need a little bit more of a tweak in order to fully fit.
Yeah, I agree entirely, right? A lot of what we do is about getting the basic fundamentals in place. When you've got that part of your recipe baked, and you can execute it consistently and at scale, then, and only then, I think, it comes the point where you start to experiment. And I'm not saying don't do your testing or A/B testing.
Totally.
Absolutely. What I'm saying is, don't overthink it. The fundamentals are the same. It's just how do you tweak things in certain key important areas to make sure you're compliant, to make sure you're culturally sensitive. But the fundamentals of understanding your ICP, understanding your value proposition, understanding your buying personas, and how to engage with them, they're the same in France, they're the same in Germany, they're the same in Portugal. That doesn't differ, right? Treating that buyer with respect, understanding that when you get their attention, those are precious moments, so make sure you're really buttoned up in terms of what it is you're communicating to them, and using technology to assist with that. That's universal. That's absolutely universal. And I think for demand generation marketers of today, embracing technology to enhance and to increase the velocity of those fundamentals is probably a really good place to start.
I love all these valuable insights. Thank you so much. One point that I want to make sure that we touch on is what you like to call your humble start in life, and guiding that more into, as leaders are looking to hire, what are some of the key features that you look for now that you've, started where you were and the journey that takes you to today? Can you shine some more light on just the whole story of what takes you today, and then the tips that you have for other go-to-market leaders in the hiring process right now?
Let me try and be brief. I'm really fortunate in life. I started out, I'm an adopted child. So I don't actually know who my ancestors are, but I know who my parents are. And that was my first lucky break, because my parents sacrificed everything to give me an education. And I look back at that as being really formative in terms of the privileges and the things I've been able to achieve. And I'm not special. I just I've had a lot of fun in tech, and I've seen some success, and I've found this niche, as I say, growing technology business is in EMEA. But it really started out, when I was adopted back in August of 1969, because I really am that old. But fast forward, I spent 6 years in the military. When it comes to leadership, a lot of the principles that I learned in the British Army, going through officer school at Sandhurst, through my operational experience in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, have stayed with me today. And the short version of that is, I believe our job as leaders is to serve the people that work with us. We're not there to do their job for them. We're not there to tell them how to do their job, but we are there to help them do it better. And that is our singular focus and function, creating a culture and environment where people can really grow their wings and fly. I mean, that for me is what it's all about. But 6 years in the Army, I started out as a BDR, as an SDR. I was that inside salesperson, whatever you want to call it. And I did that for a sales recruitment company. Now, this might make you laugh. When I started that, my KPI was 100 dials a day. That's not, that's fairly common, or at least it was back then. But it was spray and play. My telephone was literally on my desk, and it had a wire that plugged into the wall, and it had the dial. And probably most of the people listening to this don't even know what that looks like. Google what an old phone looked like. You literally lifted up the handset, you dialed the number, and if it wasn't plugged into the wall, the phone didn't connect. the internet did not exist. And so when it came to targeting, I had literally a Compass directory, which was 3 or 4 volumes, all about sort of 4 inches thick. And all it had was company names and phone numbers organized by the SIC. And my job in the southwest of England was to call those companies at random, try to get through to the sales director whose name I had no idea. I mean, that information just did not exist. And then if I got past the gatekeeper and got through to the sales director, I would ask her or him whether they were recruiting for salespeople. And that was my life for 9 months. 100 dials a day, trying to get to those connects, trying literally through brute force alone to find opportunities. Fast forward today, it's quite ironic in many ways that I'm working for a company that transforms that allows people to understand who is in market, what where they might be, can surface that contact information to them, and then not only that, can also help guide what you might want to talk to them about, all based on all of the information that we see around intent and what people are searching for. But my start was 100 dials a day, and it was literally brute force and a little bit of luck. Then I got into sales. I moved into the technology world about 25 years ago, and the rest is kind of history.
Now, what I wanted to touch on is you mentioned one of the blogs that I read doing the research for this podcast about having a specific feature that you look for in candidates when you are hiring, and that specific feature is called coachability. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so there are 3 C's that I look for.
Okay.
Curiosity, commitment, fire in the belly, right? That fire in the belly, and coachability. Why is that important? And maybe we go through them one at a time. So the first one is curiosity. I have found a direct correlation, not just with really great and successful salespeople, account managers, and the likes, but more broadly just in business and life. People that are curious are often certainly more fun to be with, but also they tend to achieve more in their lives, right? They just have this innate desire to understand, to seek more knowledge. And whether they're reading something or they're listening to a podcast like this, they're actively learning every day. And one of the greatest blessings about being a human is that the person we are today does not necessarily need to be the person we are tomorrow or next week, because we can change that, right? We can get fitter, we can get stronger, we can also increase our knowledge. And that's a really important part. But what I found is it's really hard to teach somebody to be curious.
Yeah.
You're kind of wired that way, or you're kind of not. And that's not to say that people that are not curious can't be successful. But a big part of what we do in sales as marketing is understand the customer's need and then figure out whether we can align to serve that need or not. So curiosity is really, really important. Commitment kind of speaks for itself, right? It's tough. We're in an economy at the moment where budgets are still constrained. People are looking very hard at where they're investing their time and resource, and we need to stand out and being committed to take the extra step, whether it's in our own learning, whether it's the engagement with our potential audience. That for me is table stakes. And again, in the culture that you build, of course you can have a bit more stick than carrot, but stick will only get you so far. What you get with carrot and what you get with commitment is what I call discretionary effort. That's the effort. Those are the things that people do when nobody else is there to see. And they do it because they're motivated. They know intrinsically it's the right thing to do, whatever your definition of right is. And discretionary effort is directly correlated to success. But to come back to your question on coachability, why is coachability the third thing? Hey, listen, none of us knows everything. No one of us is as smart as all of us. And so a really important part of everybody's journey in life is learning new skills, is embracing new technology, is trying new and different things. And we can get so far with our own curiosity. We can get so far with our own commitment. But if you can amplify that through the knowledge of others, and open yourself, park the ego at the door, and open yourself to the possibility that somebody else might also have really great ideas, then your trajectory, dare I say it, your fun in the work that you do will be amplified many, many, many times over. And so, that coachability is a really, really, really important point, because if you refuse to take on the views of others, there will come a point, in my experience, where your career kind of stalls or plateaus, and you might make it through, you might not. But if you're coachable and you go out of your way to learn from others, and you accept that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room, it's a lot more fun, and you generally get there a lot quicker.
Damn. I love all of that. As you were speaking through that coachability standpoint, I was thinking, this is so important as somebody who's looking for those qualities in a new hire. But then I was like, but this is equally important as somebody who's in leadership, which you just touched on, a point in your career. Just having that sense of, I'm not always right. That's the whole point of having a valuable leader, is to create a smart team with people who, hopefully are a little bit smarter than you, because then we can collectively share ideas and we can continue growing, and we can delegate in its own niche of the individual skill sets.
Yep.
So I think both collectively, as we're looking to hire and as we're looking for qualities in leadership as well, I think it's equally across the board. Coachability for me is a really hot topic, and something that's really close to my heart too, and just always giving back the curiosity, all that stuff. I love it.
We could talk for hours about the qualities of leadership. And many people will have different views. I don't profess to claim to have a unique view, but what I can do is I can tell you that one thing your job is not to be as a leader is the smartest person in the room. That is not your job. Your job, as you've touched upon, is to build that team around you and to create an environment where all voices are heard, and everybody feels that they've contributed to the strategy. And again, coming back to the audience and their everyday work, creating that space creates ideas. Ideas create innovation. And it's okay to get stuff wrong. It's okay to fail at stuff. Mm-hmm. But if as a leader, you through your actions and behaviors, either consciously or subconsciously indicate that you need to be the smartest person in the room, it suppresses those ideas and they never bubble through. So the one thing I know about leadership, it's not being the smartest person in the room. Check the ego, create an environment where voices are heard, and then have a debate around which ideas you want to take forward and which ones you're going to park for now.
I love that. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat. We're out of time, unfortunately, for this episode.
Amazing, thank you.
We could talk for hours, I'm sure. Is there a final thought that you want to leave any demand gen and go-to-market leaders for today as we approach 2025?
There are many things that I could talk about. One of the hottest topics, right, is AI and how we embrace that. I think the thing that I would leave people with is AI is not all AIs are created the same. And so for those people that are looking at it, whether it's applying it to things like the generation of email and outreach, whether it's optimization of campaigns, I think it's really important to get into the detail of how those AI engines, agents are powered, the data that they pull upon, because fundamentally it is the data that will drive the quality of much of the inputs. And then if the inputs are good, the creativity of our wonderful industry is built on a solid foundation. But if the data is generic, then that can start to unpick pretty quick. So I would say, yes, embrace AI. I talked about how it has changed the world of an SDR. That's one example. But to be very, very cautious about the ones that you partner with, and make sure you've got one with the depth of that data background, with the knowledge that's going to empower your work and not impede your work.
Amazing. Thank you, Andy, so much for taking the time to chat with me.
My pleasure. I hope to be back again soon.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Demand Gen Made Simple show. If you found value in today's episode, please consider leaving a review, as it really helps me reach more people just like you. And make sure to subscribe so you can be notified when the next episode drops. Thank you, and see you next time.